Good morning. Thank you all for being here this morning. We appreciate it. Hopefully so we can have a quorum this morning and make this official. It is official. Pursuant to notice duly given in the preceding 2 Sundays and through the voice of St. Matthew's, the 99th annual congregational meeting is hereby called to order. This meeting is governed by the Robert's Rules of Order. I have appointed Dennis McBride as parliamentarian for today's meeting.
Woo!
Theme, right?
The secretary for today's meeting will be Lynn Thomas, our council secretary.
We should have numbers for them, shouldn't they? Number 45.
And she'll also be assisted by our church staff, Pastor Chris. I've also appointed 2 tellers for today's meeting, Chris Kent and Darla Heim. The first order of business is to determine if there is a quorum, which per Chapter 10, Section 4 of our Constitution consists of 50 voting members. Chapter 8, Section 2C of our Constitution stipulates that voting members are confirmed members of the congregation who during the current or preceding calendar year have communed or made a contribution of record to the congregation. Other members present, including associate members, those who hold membership in another congregation but participate in the life of our congregation, have the right of voice but not of vote. Chris and Darla have agreed to take account. Thank you. Let the minutes reflect that we have one. I'd also like to ask that if you are stating a motion or seconding a motion, please raise your hand and state your name to help with the documenting minutes of the meeting accurately. I also ask that if you have comments or discussion, that you please speak into a microphone which we have available for you so that all members of the congregation may hear you. Thank you. Now as we begin, I'd like to ask Pastor Matt to lead us in an opening prayer.
Thank you, President Cherney. Let us pray. Oh God, guide us that we might be a healthy congregation, one that learns from failures as well as successes, that we might offer wisdom to all who cross our paths. And we ask, God, that as we strive to become the church we proclaim to be, you would help us to grow leaders focusing on the gospel, your message of forgiveness and freedom and reconciliation that has been given through your act of indescribable love in the death and resurrection of Jesus Christ. May we take a fresh look at our baptism and its promises each day and discover vitality in our relationships with you and with one another as we serve and are fulfilling your mission in your church throughout the world. Amen. Amen.
Thank you, Pastor Matt. And now I'll call on Pastor Chris, who will lead us in opening devotion.
Keep up with the slides there, too. I think back on all these annual meetings we've had over the years and all sorts of different stories, 23 years. And one of the funny ones was Gary and I were sitting in the front row and we looked down and our socks, he's got a black and a blue one on, and he goes, "Oh, that's just not right," especially for an annual meeting. But as a staff, we're going through a devotion on Bonhoeffer, and I came upon this. One of his he's one of our great Lutheran theologians, was someone that stood up in the resistance against Hitler and was executed because of it, was captured and eventually executed. But one of his great theological contributions to us as people was his distinction between cheap and costly grace. And so I wanted to read this section from one of his writings on discipleship. Cheap grace means grace as bargain basement goods. Cut rate forgiveness. Cut rate comfort. Cut rate sacrament. Grace as the church's inexhaustible pantry, from which it is poured out without hesitation or limit. It is grace without a price, without costs. Cheap grace means grace as doctrine, as principle, as system. It means forgiveness of sins as a general truth. It means God's love as merely a Christian idea of God. Cheap grace is grace without discipleship, grace without the cross, grace without the living, incarnate Jesus Christ. Costly grace is the gospel which must be sought again and again, the gift which has to be asked for, the door at which one has to knock again and again. It's costly because it calls to discipleship. It is grace because it calls us to follow Jesus Christ. It is costly because it costs people their lives. It is grace because it gives them their lives. It is costly because it condemns sin. It is grace because it justifies the sinner. Above all, grace is costly because it was costly to God. Because it cost God the life of God's own Son. You were bought with a price, in quotes. And because nothing can be cheap to us, which is costly to God. I thought of this as I thought about all the work that we've done this year, all the effort that so many people have put into helping St. Matthew's ministry grow and flourish. As you read through the different reports, so much of that is people literally giving your lives. And I just really want to say thank you for the discipleship that you've been involved in, the work and the effort that you've been, and even if it's just one of those simple things like welcoming a stranger to Sunday morning. Sometimes it takes a lot for us to go get out of our comfort zone and go across the room and welcome someone, but it means something. It's important. And so I just wanted to start with that reminder, but really a big thank you to all of you for the work that you do in helping this place to really flourish and grow. Thank you.
Thank you, Pastor Chris. The next order is for us to approve the agenda. And the purpose of the approval of the agenda is to state different aspects we're going to be approving. We need to approve next year's budget. We need to review the reports from the various committees, both the pastors and the church council, the groups and organizations of the church. We need to elect 4 people to 3-year council terms. And if there's any other business, approval of actions of officers and council for 2019, approval of motions brought during this 2019 annual meeting. So with that, I will entertain a motion to approve the agenda for today's meeting.
So moved. D. Burchell.
D. Burchell.
Second, Lynn Howard.
Thank you, Lynn. Open up for discussion. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, say nay. Motion has passed. I would now like to introduce the pastors, treasurer, and current council representatives. Please stand when I call your name. Pastor Chris Menke. Pastor Matt Schlecki-Cruz. Pastor Ann Williams. Myself, Randy Cherney, President. Treasurer, Rob Waddell. Social Ministry and Vice President, Darla Heim. Communications, Chris Kent. Fellowship, Jennifer Wills. Finance, Karen Freiberg. Human Resources, Dan Harrell. Property, Ed Bruss. Stewardship, Ryan Englehart. Ryan's not with us today. Sunday School Education, Michelle Oliver. Welcoming Evangelism, Katrina Ubel. Worship and Music, Lynn Thomas. And Youth Ministry and Council Secretary, Youth Ministry, Aaron Weiler. Thanks to all of you for your efforts this past year. A special thanks to the members whose terms expire this year. Ed Bruss, who will thankfully be renewing his second term. Dan Harrell, who will also be renewing a second term. And Michelle Wauwatosa and myself as president as well. I'd also like to thank a special thanks to Rob Waddell for his work as treasurer. We are continually blessed that he shares his expertise with us and offers a consistency to the budget process from year to year. Also, a big thanks to all the staff here at St. Matthew's. We are continually blessed and grateful for the leadership and support that the staff here provides to the congregation. At this time, I'd like to call on Rob Waddell to present the 2019 budget and to answer any questions that you might have about the church's financial situation or to the budget. Rob?
Any questions? Good morning. I think it's been safe to say that it's been quite a week here in Milwaukee and here at St. Matthew's. I think we started the week off with a little bit of cold, a lot of snow, ended up with a lot of cold, a lot of snow, then a lot of cold, and now it's back to spring. It sort of reminds me of being treasurer here at St. Matthew's. Every year we start the year off a little bit slow, depending on how weather is in January and February. Things pick up a little bit in spring with better attendance, better giving. We do hit a bit of a swale in summer when families tend to take vacations and maybe spend a little bit more time away from St. Matthew's. But we every year for the past several years, we finished the year exceedingly strong, and we end on a bright note. I would really just like to really take a minute to thank all of you, the members of St. Matthew's, for your continued strong giving and support of St. Matthew's and our ministry here at St. Matthew's. It really has been another faith-filled year of God's blessings and amazing grace here at the church. We did have a really kind of a tough entry into the fourth quarter. I think we had a lot of communication around a gap in giving. Truly, as we entered the month of December, our expenses exceeded revenues by over $90,000. Typically, we do have a gap. That gap was a little wider this year than it has been the past several cycles. Pastor Chris, I thought, did an amazing job of communicating that to the congregation during the month of December. It's oftentimes very difficult to make that communication. December, it's obviously the month of Christmas, a lot of time to, really a time to reflect and celebrate. A lot of times it's very difficult to make that year-end ask and ask folks to consider giving a little bit more. So I really appreciate the efforts with that, with both Pastor Chris and Andy Cherney to also carry that banner. We had an amazingly strong December. We had $175,000 in general fund receipts. That's roughly 20% of our operating budget that came in the month of December. We did have 76 families that either gave year-end gifts or gave to the stretch appeal. That appeal generated over $36,000. So again, just thank you for all that you do for the support of St. Matthew's. I'd also just like to thank Pastor Chris, Pastor Matt, Pastor Ann, Andy Cherney, and other council leads for your leadership and stewardship over this past year. It is a team sport, and you guys do a great job. I'd like to thank also Karen Freiberg for her leadership and guidance with the Finance Committee. Also our other Finance Committee members, Dan Byrne, Kelly Kirtley, and Thad Murrah for their work on the 2019 budget, as well as they're addressing other financial concerns of St. Matthew's over the course of the year. And finally, I'd like to express a sincere thanks to Al Van Lith. Al's in his first year as financial administrator of St. Matthew's. He's done a fantastic job. He came into the job with some experience, having been on the Finance Committee for many years. But Al does a fantastic job and keeping the church's records, and it makes my job quite a bit easier. So thank you. Really some quick comments on the 2018 financials. The financials are in the back of the annual reports on pages 36 through 39. Karen Freiberg's comments on the financials are on page 36. The financial statements themselves are on pages 37 through 39 of the package. I'd really just like to highlight a couple of numbers from the statement of activities, which is on page 39. Contributions for the year ended up being $1,191,000, including just over $1 million to the general fund. This was about $8,700 lower than our budget, but did represent a 3.8% increase in general fund giving from the prior year. That is the largest year-over-year increase in general fund giving that we have seen over the past several years. On the expense side, expenses totaled $1,195,000, with spending in ministry and operations of $948,000. That was almost $10,000 lower than budget. So again, thanks to Chris, staff, service leads for managing on the expense side so we could bring expenses in less than budget. Our total benevolence distributions, including receipts from the foundation and distributions from the Kingdom account, totaled $349,000, which is 29.4% of our 2018 receipts. For the year, our expenses did exceed contributions by $4,300. This mild deficit is our first deficit that we've had, I think, in the past maybe 4 years. Typically, we run small deficits, small surpluses. Generally, over time, we generally end up with a little bit of surplus. But it does, with that mild deficit, it does decrease our fund balance that carries into 2019 to $60,710. If we look at the statement of financial position on page 37, typically we kind of refer to as the balance sheet. Cash and cash equivalents decreased by $115,000 to $488,000 at year end. Most of that decrease comes from our dedicated funds. One is the building and debt reduction fund and the pay down of debt and other, about $70,000 of capital improvements in 2018. And the other is the Kingdom account, which has been basically spent down to zero by the end of the year, end of this past year. The Kingdom account was set up by a specific family at St. Matthew's due to just change with that member and where they are at their life stage. They began to just divest from the Kingdom account. So that is an account that has been winding down steadily over the past, I think, 3 fiscal years. And I think with disbursements in January, I think it will be fully depleted. But that's the primary driver in cash. The balance in our comprehensive fund appeal at the end of the year was $85,000. With our $4,000 deficit, our unrestricted fund balance that carries into 2019 again decreases to $60,710. In 2018, we did pay down $153,000 of principal on our mortgage loan. The year-end balance in the mortgage note is $243,200. Interest rates have ticked up incrementally in 2018. We're about 1% higher than we were this time last year. The current interest rate on the note is right around 4.25%. I do anticipate that we will be paying off the mortgage note by fall of this year. As Chris mentions in his reports, in his pastoral report, we are coming to the end of a 3-year pledge period in May of this year. At that point, we are looking to host a town hall meeting to determine what our next steps. Part of that will be a push to retire whatever balance is remaining on the mortgage note. By the end of May, I do expect the balance on that note to be right around $100,000. So it's well within our reach and ability to pay that down in 2019. Looking quickly at the 2019 budget, which appears on pages 30 and 39 of the report. The budget forecast $1,226,000 in contributions, which is a 1.7% increase over the 2018 budget and a 2.9% over 2018 actual contributions. After funding for benevolences, funds available to cover the costs of ministry and operations are $985,000. This is an increase of $28,000 over this past year. Looking at kind of the graph that's probably behind me, relates to how we spend that $985,000. The largest category really is programs. It's worship, music, our children, youth, family, and older adult education and ministries. That drives 31% of the budget. Pastoral ministries drives roughly 22% of our budget. Communications and administrative staff, about 14%, and building and property, which includes staff, utilities, building repairs and maintenance, is about 13% of our budget. So that's where really the dollars go in that budget. In addition to what we refer to as what we spend inside the walls of St. Matthew's, the budget does include $241,000 dedicated for benevolence. So these are dollars that we're bringing in either for the general fund or for special benevolences that we include in our budget that will be directly going back out in forms of benevolence. In addition to what we budget for benevolence, we do receive disbursements from St. Matthew's Foundation. The foundation has often indicated that they do not like to be included as a line item in the St. Matthew's operating budget, so we respect their wishes. But typically there are disbursements from St. Matthew's Foundation that are rolled 100% typically to the benevolent social ministry budget. In addition, we do have dedicated gifts that members make throughout the year that typically then are dedicated in restricted benevolence and paid out for benevolence. Looking at the budget, staff compensation remains the largest component of the budget, with wages and benefits of pastoral program administrative staff comprising 77% of our annual spending. Just a couple quick notes on the largest, most significant changes incorporated into the 2019 budget. The budget does include a 2% increase for staff. It does fully fund increased health insurance costs for staff at the same benefit levels that we have been in prior years. It does include a compensation adjustment for Pastor Matt and Pastor Ann up to Synod guidelines. It does include for the first time funding for either a financial statement audit or agreed upon procedures looking at really the financial statements and the financial procedures at St. Matthew's. The Finance Committee and really Council have been talking about this for the last couple of years. We thought this is one of the items that typically gets pulled out of the budget in the last phases of the process. We thought this was the year to try to keep it in there, given that we're implementing new software, and we also have a new financial administrator. We thought that this would be a good time to kick around our policies and internal controls around financial management. There's also funding for the training of a Stephan's ministry leader. The budget, as you see, was presented at Council at the January 14th meeting. The Council unanimously recommended approval by the full congregation at this meeting. With that, I will entertain questions on either 2018 financials or the budget. Yes?
I did notice you did explain something about the foundation contributions. What are the restricted contributions to benevolence?
That would be individual members that would make a dedicated contribution to us. So it might be for the Meals Ministry, or it might be for Cross Lutheran. But if we receive a donation from a member that's specified by that member for certain use, that's a restricted donation that we would then use for that purpose. Occasionally during the year, we will have special campaigns around benevolence. So like Lutheran disaster relief was a big one this past year. So if we make an ask for fund for support of causes such as Lutheran disaster relief, any contributions received for that are designated or restricted for that purpose. So that's kind of what makes up some of that number.
Does the foundation have a report for the monies that they have in the foundation?
There is the foundation does have a report out in the annual financial group in the book of reports. It's about 2/3 the way back, and roughly they have about $1 million of assets currently.
Oh, that's cool.
As far as the detail on disbursements, I don't recall what the detail was in the report.
Page 23.
Page 23.
All right, well, thank you very much, and thanks for your work.
Thank you. Yes.
Question. My name's Gordon Mealing. On page 39, benevolence distribution as a percent of member contributions for 18 was 29%. Is there any concern or discussion on the part of the pastors or the church council that is below 30%?
I will, let Pastor Chris also join the discussion. Typically, we have in the past held up a target of having a 30% benevolence target for benevolences. This year we did come in a little bit light at 29.4%. It did receive a fair amount of discussion. A lot of that is determined less so on the operating budget, but more so on, as was mentioned, the restricted gifts given toward benevolence. This past year we did have a strong support for the Lutheran disaster relief appeal, but it paled in comparison to what we had the prior year related to a couple of major hurricanes that hit. So our benevolence actually last year just was well above that target at 44% and came in a little bit shallow this year, but I think we still hold on to the average target. Yeah.
If you average it 2 years out, we do really well. You didn't say that, Mike. Yeah, one of our unwritten principles, goals that we've had as a congregation is kind of something that we've strived for, over the many years has always been this 30% mark. And it's always a wonderful thing if we can do it. It doesn't always happen. And this year it just didn't quite happen. Hopefully next year it will. We put out the request to people, and people, whatever people's life circumstances are, they'll do what they can. And the year before, for example, when we put out for Puerto Rico and Houston's hurricane experience, we had a flood of donations that came in for that. It was pretty surprising. I think it was close to 45,000. So that was really surprising. That, and I hate to say it, but sometimes you do it 2-3 times. You have another hurricane, you put another request on, see if people say, I gave to the last one. And so it doesn't come in quite as strong. And as we know, the hurricanes were just as bad this year. So that's a challenge, and we try to raise up issues that people can give to. Did you want to say something?
Yeah. One of the things to note in social ministry is that we report the hard costs. We report the dollars coming in. We don't report what comes in with the giving tree. We don't report anything, any of the underwear counted. We don't report the meals that are prepared for cross. Any of those types of programs are all soft costs that we don't have a handle on the money. If you wrap all of that in, I would say we're well over the 30%.
That's one thing we've talked about. I know Al has talked about trying to add some of that, kind of just keeping track of it. We get a count for how many underwear came in.
Well, it depends on how cheap you got them.
But and then he guesstimate on averages and such.
My commitment is to counting numbers between 0 and 9 once we get into underwear.
I think one of the evolutions of stewardship and of financial giving is also the ability that we have as individual members to give to partners and other organizations through them as well. For example, Cross ran a GoFundMe campaign for their van. And so I know of people who gave directly through that GoFundMe page. So I think the increase of online and other giving mechanisms probably underreports some of that from our perspective as well, as far as people giving, whether that's through Venmo or through other online means or other pieces. So I think that it's harder for us to track that benevolence and harder for Al, honestly. I mean, the monies that pass through us are still really important, but my guess is that the generosity stewardship extends way beyond that, and even more so year over year with more technologically advanced in various ways to give.
I appreciate your response. What I was looking for, and I heard it, is that the goal will continue to be 30%. Thank you.
Yeah, it is definitely our goal. I think I don't want to say it's increasingly difficult to do it, but I do sense that. One of the things, so one of the challenges to us this year for sure is our synod giving. So that's been something we've been very strong in the past on. We were at about 153 watermark, high watermark in that. And with a lot of the challenges we've had in our budget, we have reduced that. And 2 years ago, we started kind of a different way of trying to accomplish that. And that was, as you all know, we had the matching plan where we had the match from the Kingdom account donor for every dollar that came in from the congregation that was dedicated towards synod. It would be matched by the Kingdom account and matched by churches' extra monies, that reserves. And so we did that matching. The first year we did really well on it, partially because of a few donors that gave quite a bit to it and helped us get to the 20. This year we received about 4,000 of the 20. So that was, and partly the reason for doing that match was a sense of, well, if the congregation is really behind this giving, it will help us. It will show that this is really important to us. And it is important to us as a congregation. It's important to support the synod. And we've always said that. But that was something that took place this year. Now the Kingdom account, like Rob said, is dried up. That we won't have that match no matter what. The fund isn't there. And you can only do the match from our reserves for just so long. We've got X amount of dollars for reserves. I think we're at probably about 200 at most, if you include property reserves and all these different pots that we've got set aside. So you can only do that so long before you're really draining our reserves, which isn't healthy for us financially as a congregation as well. So we did make the difficult decision this year of reducing our synod giving by pretty dramatically. It's the same amount we had last year, which was 102 defined that was budgeted for synod, but we don't have that match. So it's quite a drop. I've been communicating this with the last two bishops. For the last 7 years, I've been saying, this is going to be challenging for us, because I could see that the Kingdom account was going away. That was also, besides the Kingdom account, they were yearly $60,000 givers. So just losing $60,000 out of one family and seeing that coming, I was kind of forecasting that to the bishops and letting them know very likely we'll have to drop our synod giving because of things like this. And so we have reduced that. Now, one of the statements that we've had a lot of discussion around that. One of the things we said was, if this year goes really well and we end up with a surplus, we would like 50% of that surplus to go strictly to synod to help us get that number back up. I'm not going to put up the chart, but I did a little research just in comparison to other congregations. Our 102 is still the number one giving congregation in the synod. The second after us is I think they're at 92. The third is closer to 70. Fourth is you start to get down to 50. Fifth down to 30. So it drops off dramatically. So the goal is still to be at a tithe. To be a tithe is a 10% of donation, 10% of giving of your budget. You know, so our goal is still to keep it at a tithe, and that's just strictly synod. Obviously, all the other things that Don asked about, the dedicated funds, those are all extras, you know, what we've done as for double term council. So, Pastor Ed.
Of course, when we talk about synod, we also have to realize that, 65% of the money that we give to the synod, and everybody gives to the synod, is used internationally. It's used for the Lutheran Church in America, it's used for international ministries, so that we aren't just giving by that money things that are done within our synod. Majority of it goes out across the country and across the world. And that's important to remember.
Right. Yeah, so that 10%, that 102 goes, it's undesignated, it's a strict gift to the synod, and then they use that according to what they need, which I thought it was 62%.
55.
It's down to 55. They've had to reduce their giving as well, based on their own changes in income as well. So they're down to 55, because I think we used to be 65, so they've dropped it by 10% in their own giving. So I would love to see it higher. Gary, when he left, he kicked it up 10% or 10,000 on his own, just for the fun of it, to really show that this is important. And we've always tried to maintain that. In fact, last year because of the match, we actually it was closer to 163. So, as I said, we've tried to be real clear with the synod on this, and that is a challenge for us. So any other questions on that?
If there are no further questions, I will entertain a motion to approve the budget for 2019 at this time.
I'll move it. I motion Jerry Wunderlich to
Thank you,
approve
Jerry.
2019 budget.
I'll second it, Dwight Scott.
All right. Thank you so much for the opportunity.
Well done, sir.
We won't have an arm wrestling match over here.
I heard it.
I'd like to open up for discussion. Anybody else has anything else they'd like to bring up? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, say nay. The motion has passed. All right, moving on, we will now open up for the pastors to discuss their pastor's report, starting with Pastor Chris.
I put just a quick slide together of things that I've been involved in. There's been a lot of things going on, and I tried to just hit some of the highlights there. I'm not going to go through them all. Big thank you to so many people, though. Our church council has done a fantastic job in so many ways. Each and every one of our council members is really appreciated and does fantastic work, really helping our ministry continue to challenge ourselves and move into new areas. One of the big ones that we did that you, I'm sure, heard all about was Servant Keeper, moving from a different computer system that really transitioned. Has anybody, if you've ever been through a computer transition at work, that's kind of what it felt like here. It was a major change, and we're still going through that. And big thanks to Brian and Al. The whole staff has really had to figure this out and get into it themselves. Appreciate the financial work Karen did. Karen Freiberg really helping to move us in this direction and make these kind of changes. But that's been one of those key pieces. Hopefully you've had a chance to use the portal and get into those kind of things. Hopefully it will really serve us well for the future. And I know it's already really helping me have better data, and it's easier to use. But as I said, big thanks to our financial secretary, our treasurer, Rob Waddell, who's done a ton of work keeping us on the straight moving forward. I didn't have a good way of saying that, sorry. But Rob is really, as you can feel with his report, just that backbone of keeping it all together, and really appreciate your work, Rob. And the whole financial committee, when we get together, the finance committee, it's really good discussions on challenging ourselves, keeping things conservative in our spending, thinking about the overall big picture, but then also challenging where are we going, what are we trying to accomplish, how can we get there, how do we stretch ourselves. It was a challenging end to the year, and when we started even before December, there was kind of really a sense of we could really end up way behind on this year, and that would not be good. And so those kind of questions, so just a really big thank you to all of you for your commitments, your contributions to help this ministry really continue to stay strong and continue to grow. Looking forward to next year, one of the things I'm going to be taking on personally in my continued education is I'm joining a stewardship cohort. I think that's a fancy way for saying small group of pastors that get together and talk about stewardship. And so the Synod has gathered a group together and brought in an outside guide, and we're going to be talking about that for 2 years. And so you might see some new things come about. And but it's always that, Gary used to say, it's our job to ask. And it's our job to put the need out. Sometimes you'll hear people say, oh, you ask too much. I try to balance that out with not asking too much, but also continuing to ask and put the needs out there. Each person gives according to as you can, as you're able to, and it's always amazing to me how some people say, well, I'm not giving to that, but I'd love to give to this. And we all have different ways that we'd like to contribute, so that's a big thing. Big thanks to our whole staff. We really have an incredible staff here. I hope you realize that. Each and every person, excuse me, is just really does great work. And I hear of the horror stories, you could say, of other pastors and the struggles that they go through. And we really have a gifted staff that really does incredible work here. We were able to celebrate some special people this year with their major years. Dave Moore at 30, and we're continuing the celebration with John at 31 as he did his sabbatical in January. That was a good chance for him to get away, and you could sense his lightness as he came back, kind of just a real jovial sense, and that was really nice. I think we all need that, don't we? Just to get away for a little bit. But and then Jill celebrated 15 years. Jill is one of those key people in the office that just was really great. But our whole staff is wonderful, and so big thanks to all of them for all that they do. Yeah, I guess I would conclude there, but any questions about my report that's in the annual report, or anything that you have questions about where we're going? All right, well, thank you.
Pastor Matt.
We really do need jerseys today, don't we?
For Minnesota.
Oh. They're not in the game. Maybe that's why we don't have jerseys.
Right. I'll be brief. I'll encourage you to read my report, or not. It's really up to you. But you can look at the hymns that I've chosen and see if you like any of the text. 4 things I'm going to name just as highlights of this past year. Our social ministry team continues to figure out the best ways, means, and strategies for how to have real, honest, tough conversations about issues socially in our community, both here in Wauwatosa and in the wider Milwaukee community, that aren't going away, and that in many ways are becoming more and more significant. And so it was good to have completed our Zeidler Center facilitation process about a year ago at this time, as we wrapped up. I think we'll continue to see that bear fruit in some ways as we look forward in how to have some of those tough conversations as church together, and learning to figure out what are the best fora for those conversations to happen in. It's not always sermons, because they're one way. Highlighted this year was also the completion of a cohort that I was part of with Marquette University around pastoral leadership in a public way. One of the things I'm grateful for is the ability to be a public leader outside of this congregation's walls, including with the Interfaith Conference of Greater Milwaukee, Lutheran Campus Ministry, with our partners at Cross. And that cohort was very supportive in thinking about how the ministry extends to community ministry and to ministry with other people of faith as well. If you'll take a notice, the page in our annual report that focuses on all the people who have died this past year. It is a long list of many bulwarks of the faith here at St. Matthew's. We're beginning to see the fruits of our funeral preparation, adult education time a year ago. Many more of those individuals have had worship conversations, have had faith conversations, but also just to think about the impact of faith stories, the impact of those lived experiences that were lost this past year. With each progressing year that I'm here, it's like, whoa, there's a whole bunch of kind of patriarchs and matriarchs of faith that go to greater glory, but also who have been a part of so many of your all lives as a part of our congregation. And lastly, I want to give a thanks to the staff members that I work with, most particularly Sue Swing, coordinating adult education has been a great force to work with, and at Presence, to work with our office staff as well, putting up with my many particularities of bulletin font and type and commas and N and M dashes and all the like. And a big thanks to you all as well. Thanks.
Good morning. My report is on page 16, but I'm sure you all know that already and have read it front to back. I would just like to say that I continue to be blessed to visit people at St. Matthew's. And as I said in my report, visit isn't really the right word for what happens when we're together. I learn so much from you, from your stories and from your lives and from your faith, and I'm so grateful for it. And often people will say, I'm sorry to go on, or I'm sorry to tell you this sad story about my life. And I prefer it so much more than, fine, I'm okay, how are you? I would much rather hear the truth of your stories and the truth of your life. And when I do, it blesses me. And I'm so grateful for it. And it stays with me. And I talk about what you've taught with my husband and my kids. And they've learned a lot from you too. I've learned a lot about what it means to die and what it means to live, and you are forming me into a better pastor and a better person, and I'm so thankful to you. I also work with the Healing Prayer Team, and we are constantly trying to figure out ways to include healing in all its forms and variations into the life of the congregation. And there will be an adult forum the Sunday right before Lent that will focus on healing. And I hope that you will all come and be a part of that educational time and be a part of the healing. It'll be kind of an art installation that will happen during Lent. So I hope that piques your interest. And let's see, I also do a lot of work with Stephen Ministry, and my partners in that are Sue Swing and Ginny Kleppe. And Sue is an amazing colleague and someone who makes me want to be better every day. And I'm grateful to her and to the work that she has done here for years and years, and the ways that she lets me tag along in all of that. To date, 18 people in the congregation have received the care of a Stephen minister. That number is going up as we speak. It'll be 19 or 20 in the next couple of days, which means that 18 people in the congregation have received consistent Christian care from another lay member of the congregation during a difficult season in their life. And I wish that was something I could measure or put up onto a slide and give you the statistics of how wonderful that is, but there really is no way to measure the goodness of Christian people being there for each other in real ways during difficult times. And that number will continue to go up, and hopefully the people who have received that care will keep spreading that love, and it will just take over our community. There have been some big changes in my family recently. I'm not pregnant, don't worry. My husband left his call at Christ the Servant Lutheran Church. He was a half-time. A couple years ago, he decided he wanted to follow a lifelong dream of being a lawyer. And so he will be an amazing lawyer for having been an amazing pastor for the past 15 or 20 years. And so he got full scholarship to Marquette University and is a full-time law student as of this semester. His last Sunday at Christ the Servant was last Sunday, which means that we are students again. And Jay goes to school and my kids go to school in the morning, and that I am the breadwinner of our family. So there's some big things that have been happening in my life, and I'm thankful for your support and understanding during this time of transition. People keep telling me congratulations, and I say, that doesn't feel like the right word. So I thank you for that, and the last thing I'd like to say is that I would be running around like a chicken with my head cut off if it weren't for people like Sonia and Jill and Sue and Al, the people who teach me over and over and over again how to use the copy machine. For people like Marcia, who I walk in the morning and my office is clean, even after my children have been visiting me. So there are so many people who make this place run with their gifts for what they do in their job, but also just who they are is a beautiful thing. And so I'm thankful to you for opening up your hearts and your lives to me. And one of my goals for this next year is to find a cohort so I'm not left out.
Mine's over. I'm empty.
You're done? Your cohort's done. But to work more on my preaching. So hopefully that's something I can report to you next year. Thank you.
Thank you, Pastor Al.
I have a motion I'd like to make at this point. May I do so? Please. I make the following motion. We, the saints of St. Matthew's Church, on this Super Bowl Sunday, do hereby vote to elevate our wonderful pastors, staff, and lay leaders to the exalted position of super sainthood for their excellent leadership and work among us, the community, and in the larger world. And
That motion is out of order.
if there's any question about this motion, I'm prepared to give a half-hour speech.
With respect to time, I don't think we have time for that, but we do appreciate that. Well deserved, indeed. I do encourage you to take a look at the standing committee reports that were provided for each of the council members. We won't go through these in detail at this time, but they are reported for your reference. I do want to say very quickly, just at the beginning of the year, I had such a wonderful time serving on this council. And at the beginning of this year, I really challenged and encouraged our council leaders to really feel the palpable presence of God in all things that we do, not only when we step in this house, but when we're interacting with friends and family, as well as participating in activities that each of our committees have put on in St. Matthews. And we had an opportunity this year, and a focus this year really is in reaching across the aisle and trying to get to know our members in a more meaningful and faithful way. So I obviously want to thank all of the council members who served this year, and as we look forward to council for next year, I'd like to invite our new council members to please come to the front of the room as I call your name. Property, Ed Bruss, repeating his 3-year term. Thank you, Ed. With Human Resources, Dan Harrell. Social Ministry, Pam Stokey-Cece. And Education, Renee Mabey. And at this time, I'd also like to invite any additional nominees from the floor. And Renee is not able to be with us today, but I do invite our nominees to introduce themselves to the congregation and say a few words about themselves.
I survived 3 years, and Pastor Chris asked for another 3. I'm a retired physician. HR really isn't in my skill set, but I'm trying to make it there. I'll be here this afternoon watching my granddaughter take her first communion along with some 20-odd family members, so I do spend a good amount of time at this church.
I'm Ed Bruss. I've been here for 3 years. My fan club is out there. And I got drafted also for another 3-year term. So we'll hopefully keep St. Matthews running smoothly and everything working.
Pam Stokey-Cece, I think Joe and I decided we've been here for 17 years now, and I've been on the Social Ministry Committee for 5, and I'm constantly amazed at this congregation's benevolence to the greater Milwaukee area and the world. It's really been gratifying. I look forward to carrying on Darla's visions, I think, yes, and traditions with the great help of Pastor Matt. I'm looking very much forward to that, and I'm pleased to be part of this group.
I'd like to now invite a motion to close nominations.
So moved. Lynn Howard?
Thank you, Lynn. Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Marion. Open up for discussion. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed say nay. And the motion has passed. I would like to entertain a motion to elect our nominees with a combined ballot to a 3-year council term. Entertain a first motion.
So moved.
Lynn Howard. Thank you. Do I have a second?
Herb Shaner.
Herb Shaney, thank you. Open up for discussion. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed say nay. The motion has passed. Please give a sign of appreciation to our As another order of business, I'd like to state that the Constitution of St. Matthews gives council the authority to select up to 5 lay voting members to represent St. Matthews at the annual Synod Assembly, which is May 31st and June 1st at the Italian Community Center. This year, anyone under the age of 31 is eligible as a voting member and will not count toward the total voting members. First choice will be for the officers, then other council members, and then members of the congregation. If you are interested in attending, please contact one of the pastors or one of the council members. At this time, I invite you to bring up any new news, any new business. Hearing none, I will entertain a motion to approve the actions of the officers and the council during 2018. I'm sorry, what was the first?
Kurt Weber.
Thank you, Kurt. Jim Engelhardt, is the second. Open it up for discussion. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, say nay. The motion has carried. At this time, I would like to ask the secretary to read all of the motions that were made at this morning's meeting, after which I'll entertain a motion to approve all the motions that were made today.
Okay, the first motion was to approve the agenda for today's meeting. That was made by Dee Burchell and seconded by Lynn Howard. The motion passed. The second motion was to approve the 2018 budget. That was made, 2019 budget. Sorry. That was made by Jerry Wunderlich and seconded by Ed Weiscott, and the motion passed. There was a motion to close nominations for church council for 2019. That was made by Lynn Howard and seconded by Marion Heinz, and the motion passed. And a motion to elect the nominees with a combined ballot to a 3-year council term was made by Lynn Howard and seconded by Herb Shanehair, and that was passed. And the last was to approve the actions of the officers and council during 2018. That was made by Kurt Weber and seconded by Jim Engelhardt, and that motion also passed.
So now I'll entertain a motion to approve that motion. I'm sorry, Deb.
Deb and Dean.
Thank you. Do I have a second? Thank you, Ed. Open it up for discussion.
This means we don't have to approve the thing next year by doing this now. This is good job. By doing this now, we
In
got it.
case it feels monotonous at all. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, say nay. And the motion has passed. I will now entertain that motion to adjourn today's meeting. Thank you, Marion Hines.
Second.
Thank you.
Who seconded it?
Open up for discussion. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, say nay. And the motion is passed. If there's no additional business for discussion, I'll ask Pastor Matt, please, in the closing prayer.
Let's pray. God, let us your servants depart in peace, that we might live according to your word, that we might bring your light to the nations, to the world, and that we might be sustained by your grace and mercy as we go about our work, rejoicing in the gift of your grace for us. In your holy name we pray. Amen.
We are adjourned. Thank you for attending today.